What does it take for a billion-dollar company, a true corporate giant, to just crumble into dust overnight? It's not always a market crash or some new competitor. Sometimes the most spectacular implosions, they start from the inside. They're sparked by a total catastrophic failure of ethics. Today, we're diving into what happens when a company's moral compass shatters and what we can all learn from the wreckage. Okay, let's jump right in with one of the most jaw-dropping cases in corporate history. We're headed to India, to a company called Satyam Computer Services. Back in the early 2000s, these guys were an absolute titan in the IT world. But behind the curtain, its chairman was hiding a secret. A secret so massive, it was destined to bring the entire empire crashing down.
And this is the chilling confession from the man at the center of it all, Ramalinga Raju. It all started with just a small lie about the company's profits. But then, you know how it goes. He had to tell a bigger lie to cover that one up, and then an even bigger one. He was trapped, literally riding a tiger of his own creation. And he knew that eventually it was going to devour him.
And this number? This was the size of that tiger. We're looking at 7,136 crore rupees. Now, if you're not familiar with India numbering, a crore is 10 million. So we are talking about well over $1 billion at the time. This is the amount of cash that Satyam claimed it had sitting on its books. Cash that was never there. It didn't exist. It was pure fiction, cooked up with fake invoices and inflated numbers to fool everyone. So look at the sheer speed of this collapse. It's just incredible. You see the stock price on January 6th, and then, boom, the nosedive on January 7th, the very day Raju finally confessed. The market's reaction was instant and absolutely brutal. The stock price tanked 78% in a single day. Shareholder value was just annihilated. The future of thousands of employees thrown into chaos. And just like that, India's largest corporate fraud was exposed for the world to see. The tiger had finally pounced. Right, so a disaster of this magnitude, it doesn't just happen because of one bad guy. It's a systemic breakdown. And to really understand how something like this is even possible and how to stop it from happening again, we need to dig into the fundamentals of what business ethics are all about. At its heart, business ethics is a pretty simple idea. It's that companies should run based on moral principles. But here's the key distinction, and it's a big one. What's legal is just the floor, it's not the ceiling. Just because you can do something without breaking the law doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Satyam's actions, well, they crossed both lines. But the ethical failure happened long before the legal one. So how did the whole system fail so completely at Satyam? Well, it was like a perfect storm on 3 different levels. First, you've got the individual level, pure greed from Raju. Then, at the organizational level, you had a complicit internal audit team and a board that was just passive. They weren't asking the hard questions. And finally, at the systemic level, the external auditors completely failed in their duty, and corporate governance was just a piece of paper, not a practice. It was a total, multi-layered meltdown. We can even diagnose this using a framework like Kohlberg's stages of moral reasoning. Stage 1 is all about you. It's about self-interest, basically just trying not to get caught. And Satyam's leadership, they were stuck right there, at the bottom. They weren't thinking about social norms, and they certainly weren't thinking about universal principles like honesty or integrity. They were just trying to keep the tiger from eating them. It's a classic pre-conventional mindset. So to avoid these kinds of disasters, leaders really need some tools to help them make better decisions. And lucky for us, philosophers have been building these toolkits for centuries. And these aren't just abstract ivory tower ideas. They are actually super practical frameworks for navigating really tough ethical choices. First up, you've got virtue ethics. This one isn't about rules or outcomes. It's all about character. It asks a really simple but profound question. What would a person of integrity do in this situation? A virtuous leader at Satyam would have never created that first fake invoice because their character, their deep down commitment to honesty just wouldn't let them. Next, we've got utilitarianism, which is all about the consequences, the outcome. The goal here is to create the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. And businesses, well, they use this kind of thinking all the time, especially in cost-benefit analysis. But as we're about to see, this can lead you to some really dark places if they're not careful. And finally, there's deontology. This framework is all about absolute duties and universal rules. It couldn't care less about the consequences. It asks, what if everyone acted this way? And maybe most importantly, it says you can never treat human beings as just a means to an end. People are not just numbers in a calculation. And this slide just perfectly illustrates the clash between these toolkits. Take the infamous Ford Pinto case. Ford knew the car's fuel tank had a deadly flaw. From a purely utilitarian viewpoint, they did the math. They calculated that paying out lawsuit damages for the injuries and deaths would actually be cheaper than fixing the car. So what was the decision? Ship it. But a deontological approach would scream no. You cannot put a price tag on a human life. That treats people as a means to profit. The decision from that perspective? Fix the car. The framework you choose has literal life or death consequences. So, we've seen how these frameworks can lead to these cold, hard calculations with drastically different results. But what happens when the ethical failure isn't some secret buried in a boardroom, but a very public breach of trust over something people feed their kids every single day? Let's pivot to our second case, Nestle and its iconic Maggi noodles.
So in 2015, this massive storm just erupted. Regulators in India found lead levels in Maggi noodles that were way over the permissible limits, a terrifying thought for parents everywhere. By June, India's Food Safety Authority ordered a nationwide recall. I mean, for a brand that was built on trust and convenience, this was an absolute catastrophe. After a court battle and a bunch of new testing, the product did come back in November, but the damage was done.
And the cost of that broken trust was just staggering. Nestle lost 320 crore rupees. That's over $50 million in revenue in just one quarter. A whole army of contract workers lost their jobs, and an iconic brand was teetering on the verge of collapse, all because of a failure in product safety and, just as importantly, transparency. So here's the key lesson from all of this. What the Nestle case really hammers home is that when you sell a product that people put into their bodies, transparency isn't just some marketing buzzword. It's a fundamental ethical obligation. It's not optional. Nestle's recovery was built on finally embracing that, with open communication and public testing. It's a lesson they definitely learned the hard way. Okay, we've looked at two pretty catastrophic failures. So now let's zoom out a bit to the big picture philosophies that can help companies build ethical organizations from the ground up so that these crises, hopefully, never even happen in the first place. A really great way to think about this is Carroll's pyramid. The foundation, the base level, is economic responsibility. A business has to be profitable to survive, right? The next level up is legal. You got to obey the law. But here's the thing. Those are just the foundations. The next level is ethical responsibility, doing what is right and fair even when the law doesn't force you to. And only after all of that do you get to the top, to philanthropy, being a good corporate citizen. You just can't skip the first three steps. And this all leads to a really fundamental debate. Who is a business actually for? The old-school shareholder theory says its only goal is to maximize profit for its owners, period. But the more modern stakeholder theory argues that no, a company is responsible to everyone it affects, its employees, its customers, its suppliers, the whole community. When you think about it, Satyam failed its shareholders. Nestle failed its customers. Both of these cases make a really powerful argument for that broader stakeholder point of view. So after digging into these meltdowns and philosophies, what's the big takeaway here? How should we really orient our own ethical compass when it comes to the world of business? I think it all comes down to this one powerful idea. Ethics is not a burden. It's not a list of rules that's just designed to slow you down. It is the absolute bedrock of trust. And in the long run, trust with your investors, with your customers, with your employees, that is the only truly sustainable competitive advantage you can have. Satyam showed us what happens when you have none of it, and Nestle showed us what it costs to lose it and what it takes to win it back. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. When you look at the companies you deal with every single day, who do they really seem to be serving? Is it all about the shareholder and the stock price? Is it the customer above all else? Or is there maybe another stakeholder that's now taking center stage? It's definitely something to consider as we all try to navigate this modern corporate world.